Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED, and this is Q5 Ham Radio. This is part 5 of our 7-part series on contesting fundamentals with Pride K1RX. Up to this point, we focused on building the best station you can with what you have right now: your radio, your antennas, your software, and your space. In this episode, we shift gears, because once the station is set, the next step isn't more gear, it's you. Operating skill development starts in your shack. It's about learning where your station plays best, choosing events that maximize both performance and fun, and deliberately putting yourself in situations that sharpen your listening, timing, and decision-making. From short practice events to larger on-air stress tests, the goal is simple: become more efficient, more predictable, and more confident on the air. This series is proudly supported by DX Engineering, helping operators at every level build, refine, and get more out of their stations. Welcome back, Mark.
Good to be back.
Mark, it's really great to have you back here. We're getting great responses to the first 4 episodes, and now we're looking at episode 5. Tell me what the next steps are.
Next step is addressing your operating skill development. And that means you sitting in the shack, making contacts, leveraging the tools that you've got, leveraging the equipment that you've got, your antennas, and start learning from there. Some of the early suggestions here might be in order to enhance your skill, join organizations like CWOps. And they run hourly contests every week, during the week, several times through that week. And it's a great opportunity to improve your CW copying or CW skills related to contesting. I've recently learned that there are some shorter contests out there, duration 5 and 10 minute long. It's really quite amazing. But the opportunity here is to start using all of the tools that you've got, and you want to set up all of these contests, whatever you do, in an assisted mode. This is where you've got all of the maximum learning opportunity in front of you, having the category that you operate in the assisted range. This will help with your logging. It'll create a bigger score for yourself, which is always fun. Another thing that's of value is to participate in some of these special events that are out there, things like the Worldwide Award. This is typically done the entire month of January, and it's really taken hold, especially in Europe. A lot of interest, a lot of activity around that program. There's programs in the U.S., in the Northeast, 13 colonies, and then there's other special events like the Worked All States 250 going on with W1AW, portable, whatever the state might be that week. So it's an opportunity to do things like stress testing, which is what I find very helpful in evaluating your station, evaluating yourself, and naturally growing with the experience. Gives you pile-up management practice. The objective is no waiting. You come across someone that's running a pile-up or CQing, and you come across him, and ideally you want to be able to work him like immediately. Okay, if you don't work him on the first call, that's okay. You call him a second time, that's okay. And maybe on the second or third try, he answers you. But that's all driven by someone who's well-practiced in pile-up management. He maintains a small pile-up as best he can, and he's always answering someone every single time somebody calls, even if it's a partial call. Back before the old internet and the packet and telnet and all that sort of thing, recall a time in a contest when a guy named Nosy, KH6IJ, very famous contester from Hawaii, he would get on the low bands, and in particular, I remember 80 meters. He would call CQ, and he might get 1 or 2 people answering him. And he would just go back and call CQ again, and the pileup would start to grow. And finally, he'd have a very good pileup going, or a pileup of people calling, but he hasn't answered anyone yet. And the objective was to create enough noise on that frequency that he would be able to attract a sustaining pileup. And this is all before the internet and spotting and all of those things. So I thought it was kind of a clever thing that he did. I was always impressed with his skill there. But in this in this time of stress testing, you want to look at breaking a lot of the bad habits. And believe me, there are a lot of bad habits out there. But just to bounce back to the Worldwide Award Program, which is an awards program. It's not really a contest, but it creates an environment just like a contest. I reached out to a woman that I had been mentoring over in Wales. Her call is GW7YLS. And back in December, I was speaking with her because she had worked me the year before, and we had established kind of an email relationship, and her brother as well. Brother, sister, they live separately, but they're both in the amateur radio, and they both like contesting and the awards program, things like that. I'd been corresponding with her, and she asked me if I could help her with N1MM, getting that set up, because she was really just not comfortable with it. So we set up a Zoom call. We talked like an hour and a half and got her all going in that, which was great. It was in advance of some smaller contest going on. At any rate, during that conversation, I mentioned you really ought to consider getting into this Worldwide Award Program, become an activator. And she said, well, I just don't have much of a station, 100 watts, a double L dipole configuration. I forget exactly how that's done. And I said, no, it's okay. Go ahead and give it a try, and see what happens. So if I can share with you an email response, I said in this last email exchange, I said, okay, so how did you do? And she replied with, I made 2,770 QSOs, 2,200 on single sideband, 550 on the digital modes, and I found that 17 meters ended up being the best band that I had, the best results. My maximum QSO rate was 114. So then she made some observations, which I had encouraged her to do. And she said, this exercise improves your ability to pick out call signs in a pileup speedily and accurately. Feel less intimidated being on the air. It's a good cure for mic shyness. She also went on to say, it makes me feel comfortable using N1MM at a fast pace, and I use the stored messages to save my voice when calling CQ. To check other bands or other propagation happening on other frequencies, it isn't that difficult to check the screen and see what's going on. And sometimes you can be surprised what you get called by. It really focuses your mind, improves your mental sharpness. It hones your listening skills and the ability to pick out weak signals under challenging conditions. Better knowledge of your receiver. I learned more about how to get a stronger signal with less noise. The opportunity to improve and optimize your station setup. That was another plus. And her conclusion was, I need a better antenna. So there you go, one item for the list that we've talked about in the past. So it really does, contesting in general or any kind of high rate activity definitely sharpens the mental facilities and keeps you moving. In fact, I've run across a few people, elderly people with ailments, health issues, and they've told me that if it wasn't for ham radio, my quality of life would be terrible, and that was really quite remarkable.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate what you're saying, because at one of our earlier episodes, you talked about starting from where you are when it came to gear. And now you're talking about operating, starting from where you are. Just get on for an hour, get on for a couple hours. And you kind of remove that daunting experience of facing a 48-hour contest, even if you don't intend to operate all 48. Just the idea of entering CQ Worldwide, I think for a lot of us, is very overwhelming. So to get on for CWOps or for a shorter time makes a lot of sense. You mentioned something about bad habits. And I know this is something that comes up a lot with the contest crew and some of my other interviews. What are you talking about when it comes to bad habits, and how do I avoid those?
Great question. And it is a prevalent issue within the operating world. When I refer to bad habits, when you think about a contester who's kind of seriously going at it, he is looking for the maximum amount of information being sent in the minimum amount of time. Contesting is a time-driven event. So some of the the negatives that are out there, they all come from different experiences. An operator might have come from the world of traffic handling and passing messages, and there's a formal setting to that, in the net control, turning it over to you and back and forth and exchanging the message. Please copy, things like that. Emergency operations, PODA, SODA, those types of things. Field day in particular, I always get a kick out of operating field day when I'm listening to some of the operating or the habits that I'm seeing out there. And I'm constantly pointing out to someone who's sitting next to me, that's not a good thing. You need to shorten that up or say it differently, because I'm using examples of other operators that are on the air. But this whole thing about the bad habits where people will repeat things, you repeat the exchange back to you. I'm assuming that they're believing, I just want to make sure he knows that I copied all of the information correctly. And if there's a problem, he'll come back and tell me. You don't need to do that. You don't need to repeat the exchange back to the person you just received it from. That's just not efficient. So what's the answer to that? Just simply acknowledge it. Roger, thank you. And let him move on. And I mentioned this please copy expression. That is an incredible time waster, for lack of a better term. And it's just simply unproductive in the time that you've got speaking with each other. Probably another crazy thing that drives me nuts is the not identifying yourself. I've come from a world that says it pays to advertise. The more you get your call out there, the more you're going to have people calling you. So identify yourself. There's conversation out there that says identify yourself every 2 or 3 QSOs. Yeah, that's okay, but is it really going to kill you to identify after every single QSO? It only improves your opportunity. That's the way I see it. So, then finally, when you tune into a pileup or you come across somebody, try to get into the cadence, the flow of what that person is trying to do. Try to, the faster you can adapt to his cadence process, the faster you're going to work this person, because you're going to be able to understand better the dynamics of what's happening on the frequency, and you'll be able to drop your call in at the right moment, QSO in the log.
So, Mark, I've got to imagine that bad habits become worse because particularly beginner or intermediate operators, sometimes the veteran operators, you kind of get caught up in the moment, right? What do you recommend to get past that? Do you recommend people record themselves or have buddies like listen in? I think you understand what I'm saying, that it's hard in the moment to realize that you're doing something over and over again.
That is a great point. In my, one-on-one training that I do with people, I'm sitting there with the headphones, with them. And when I hear them speak, not in an efficient way, but, they're making extra comments that really doesn't need to be said, at that point I can correct them. I can say, no, you don't want to do it this way. And they've constantly come back and said, oh, yeah, that's right. You said that and I forgot. And it just keeps, it requires you to really focus on really paying attention to the shortness of the exchange. But it's a great point about perhaps record yourself and then play back a lot of that. And then you can hear for yourself where you're going wrong. Because if you don't have the luxury of someone sitting next to you who's a little more experienced and who's gently pointing out to you that, you need to correct this or not repeat this thing or not say these extraneous words, you really don't have anything to learn from. So by having a recording, I think that's an excellent idea. Even if it's just for, half an hour, you don't have to record the whole contest. You just want to get a sense of how am I doing on the air, short of someone coming back and critiquing you on the air, which is not going to happen.
Mark, I'd like to dive into the difference between running a frequency and S&P, search and pounce, and what, as a beginner contester, I should be focused on doing.
Yeah, you really need to divide the whole contesting world, into a searching and pouncing, as they say, S&P, which is just spinning the dial or moving up and down the band map with your controls on, say, N1MM with control up and down arrow, finding new stations. And the alternative to that is calling CQ on a frequency. That takes that's a lot of stress. As you've probably discovered in the worldwide award type of activity, you're CQing, everybody's calling you. That can be a little overwhelming. But the best way to really start off in this whole game is play the search and pounce game. Tune the dial, find stations, understand their cadence, drop in your call, make the contact, and move on. And it's really a matter of practicing entering those call signs into your logging program. The entry window on N1MM, I will set that up such that it's easy viewing, and I make it, that's the primary objective, is to fill that box with the correct call. So if it takes a couple times to hear the call and assure yourself that you're entering the correct letters, do it. Take that time. And this is all about learning, all about practice, all about just experiencing the whole thing.
So, Mark, can you give me a starting point?
Best thing to do on every contest that you participate, you want to read the rules. You want to understand, how are points generated? Is it a regional thing? Is it there's so many things you need to pay attention to when it comes to the rules, but that's the key. How is the score produced? And then how do I maximize my opportunity to create a bigger score? And I think in setting up as a search and pounce, or I should say as a beginner in this process, operating in the search and pounce mode, you want to set up your logging entry as assisted. Nowadays, it's very prevalent to use the internet, take advantage of the data that's coming in, the spots. That just makes it even more enjoyable for those who really appreciate that added value. But with the assisted entry, it really gives you the maximum learning opportunity. You see what's happening real time, what stations are on what frequencies, what bands are very active. There's a tremendous opportunity to learn more. As far as things you should know, you really ought to have a good handle on frequency allocation for different parts of the world. You need to pay attention to, hey, I can find Europeans on 40 meters below the band that the portion of the band I'm operating. They can operate on sideband down to 7040. Some people just don't realize that 40 meters is a bigger band than you might realize. Of course, in this particular region in the U.S., you cannot operate in those frequencies, but there's a thing called split frequency. So you have opportunities to pursue that. But it all kind of comes from your knowledge of the frequencies that are allocated to different parts of the world. And that will make you a bit more efficient. You're going to learn where people are, where they're hanging out. So that's a good thing. Another thing is prefixes. I've had people come to my house and operate, and I've got an ability to switch directions quickly. And as people tune the band, either going up and down the band map, they find a prefix they've never heard of, or just in their limited experience, they don't know what that prefix is, what country that is. So it really forces them to, well, if I want to use the best antenna that I've got at Mark's house, I need to know where this place is or where this person is coming from. So I think it's really important to start learning the prefixes. As a side note, if you ever watch movies that have aircraft in them, helicopters and small aircraft, jets, whatever, is part of the props in the movie, if you ever look at their tail number, you will see a prefix, a country designator. And I always get a kick out of saying, oh, that airplane's actually from Iceland, because you see TF or something, or 9A for Croatia. It's just kind of a fun thing, but it's an offshoot of that knowledge of knowing prefixes. Another thing, and I had mentioned this on some earlier episodes, phonetics. In a contest or in a phone contest, you want that to flow just like we're speaking words to each other. We want it to be nicely articulated, and all the common standard phonetics used. And that will improve your ability to get through pileups quicker, things like that. I mentioned Telnet before, all that data coming into, taking advantage of being an assisted or in the assisted category. using a telnet to feed all of that, that can be helpful, but it can be dangerous. If you're not paying attention, you could be chasing a multiplier outside of your frequency band. I've seen countless situations where they're not paying attention and they're just calling people on the list that are spotted, and they don't realize they're transmitting outside of their authorized band. And you just need to be a little cognizant of where you are on the bands. And when it comes to CW and related to telnet issues, if you go to a spot as a CW operator, you and 50,000 other people will end up on the exact frequency, and the person who's operating that frequency, running the pileup, all they're going to hear is basically a solid tone, and there'll be no intelligence coming out of that at all. So how do you offset that? You intentionally offset your transmit frequency by maybe 30, 50, maybe 100 hertz, just enough to differentiate your signal from this constant tone that thousands of people are trying to, or that are using the same frequency that create that, solid mess. And it's very, very difficult. So a simple way to do it is just take your receiver incremental tuning, your RIT, and offset it by, maybe 30 or 50 hertz. And then it should stay in that mode as you go up and down the band calling people, and you will automatically have the proper offset. It'll make life so much easier for both sides of the equation.
Mark, I really appreciate all the things that you're going to learn doing S&P. What else could I learn by going up and down the dial and calling different operators?
Well, you're going to discover that how well your station is performing. Are you getting through are you getting in the call through quickly enough? Sometimes you'll get a response back that tells you, wow, you're loud. The operator on the other end is surprised by how strong your signal is. And then there'll be other situations where you call and they get part of a call, you call again, they still get, it's a real struggle. So there are issues going on there that make it challenging for the operator to receive you. It could be a number of things. And this, here you're getting a sense of what's going on propagation-wise. It could be as simple as their antennas pointed in another direction, and they're hearing you, say, off the back of the antenna. We'll get into that conversation in a bit. But when it comes to going up and down the band, you get that immediate sense of how well your station's working, how strong your signal is. And if you're starting to see that I get a response every single time I call on the first call, that's a clear indicator that I think it's time to go call CQ and go run stations if you can, or if you're ready to do that. That's okay. I mean, it's okay to just go up and down the band and get told you're the loudest thing on the band. That's great. And carry on.
So what if I'm not the loudest person on the band and I'm feeling a little bit frustrated that I can't seem to get the momentum going that I had hoped for?
Well, with the tools that we have available and things like N1MM, where you can go control arrow up and down, you can quickly go up and down the band map. And when I'm operating at a station that's got a limited capability as far as signal strength, I will just simply hit the band with this feature control up and down, and just keep moving up and down and calling stations as I find them. And if they don't come back right away, maybe I'll call a second time. But during that second time, I'm kind of doing a situation awareness there to figure out what's really going on here. Who's he coming back to? Is he answering people in other parts of the world that I should recognize that, okay, I've got no opportunity to work him now, but I will come back. And with the ease of this tool and being able to go up and down the band very quickly, that's okay. If I call him one or two times and I don't get through, no problem. Just keep moving. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. And you'll be surprised that, eventually, you'll start, getting through. And then, oh, by the way, you can go back down the band and call those same people again, maybe 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later. By then their pileup may have subsided and you get an opportunity to work them. So you just have to keep moving up and down the band, calling everybody. As a little hint in terms of avoiding some continuous challenge, if you go from the bottom of the band to the upper part of the band all of the time, what happens is, in a lot of cases, your fellow competitors on the band are traveling in the same way. So you end up competing with the very same person on the next pileup as you go up and down the band. So to counteract that, go from the top of the band to the bottom of the band. So then you only cross these people, these competitors, one time. And then you've got maybe a better shot. If you find you're, going up the band and you're following the same pack of people, you want to break that up because you're just not going to get through possibly based on earlier tries. And one last note on this, on the way the bands play, I would always go to the highest possible frequency what's open. As soon as the sun comes up on the East Coast, we're looking toward Europe. And we want to go to the highest frequency that's open because that will be your best advantage. And I think that fundamentally holds true anywhere you are in the world. So you want to keep staying on the highest band that has good coverage into the target area. And in this case would be Europe in that environment. Keep your gray line map open on your computer. That'll give you, if you're not that experienced in terms of propagation, keeping your gray line map in play, it'll give you a very good real-time sense of what's happening on the bands. Some of your other guests have made comment about things like that. As soon as the path of darkness kicks in, their signal drops on the high frequencies. It's really quite an amazing phenomena. That's kind of neat to listen to.
Mark, in one of our prior conversations, you introduced this concept of parallel play. What do you mean by that?
That term actually came up sitting around in my living room with my son-in-law and my daughter. There was a moment we were all talking, and then all of a sudden we all stopped, and everybody's looking at their cell phone, looking at their emails, they're looking at web pages, whatever they're doing. We just take a pause in the conversation, and it's probably a phenomena that we see almost daily in our lives. But what brought me to that term parallel play was, what I described. But also, I think that term could have a nice play in the area of practicing contesting. And by that I mean, you're sitting at your station, you're having some problems working people. Maybe take a little shift in gears and turn on the general logging program and go find somebody in your neighborhood or 20 kilometers away or whatever that you can hear very well. And they're having good success. They're talking to people at a high rate. And when I say parallel play, I'm thinking of you have a log open. Doesn't have to be the contest log. In fact, I would prefer that it not be the general log, like in N1MM. Where you sit and listen to that person running stations. When he's calling out call signs like G3 X-ray Yankee Papa, you type in G3 X-ray Papa Yankee, and then when he gives the exchange, and whether you can hear that station or not doesn't matter. But the fact that he is basically announcing in real time call signs that are legit, it gives you a chance to kind of practice that. And if you sat and listened to somebody who's running at 100 or 200 an hour and you're able to keep up, you're doing really, really well. But it's a great way to practice. Unfortunately, it's not putting any points in your log for that event. But sometimes you got to just recognize that this particular contest, whatever it might be, is just not delivering the fun and excitement that I was hoping for with my station. So do the parallel play. Go listen to somebody else, set up a different log, and practice what they're doing. Taking that one step another direction, a lot of us travel on business and whatever. We bring our laptop, headphones, sitting in the hotel room. You got nothing to do. You happen to be, in a hotel at the time of a contest, and it's a contest you really wish you could have participated in, but you couldn't. So you fire up the laptop and you tune into an SDR site, sdr.org, give you plenty of opportunities, and tune around and find some stations that are doing exactly what I just mentioned. They're running stations. Maybe find a European contester that's sitting there, working stations at a high rate. Could be fellow Europeans, it could be North America, it could be Asia, doesn't matter. But what you want to do is tune into those stations and open your general log in your laptop and start filling in the call signs he's working. And that is another opportunity to practice learn. Of course, it's not going to help you in any kind of contest because it's not your QSOs you're making. And it's just a phenomenal way to practice. And at the end of all that, you type in the term or the word wipe log, and it will wipe out that whole log, and you can close up the laptop and go home. And you've experienced the contest in a different kind of way, but a fun way.
Mark, I love the idea. I've had over 150 interviews. This is the first time I've heard this practice technique, but it makes so much sense. If you can't participate in the contest, I really love it. So let's say I've gotten better with the practice and I've done some S&P and I feel like I'm ready to take the next step and maybe run a frequency. What do I need to know?
Okay, so running stations, that's a result of calling CQ on a clear frequency. And that's probably the number one challenge in that exercise is how do you find a clear frequency? There are so many things happening on the band. You might find a clear frequency. It sounds great for the 1 or 2 seconds that you were listening, and you think, well, I will check to see if the frequency is in use. Do the polite thing, frequency in use, question. And if you get no response, you start calling CQ. You start listening, and immediately people are calling back saying, hey, the frequency is in use. And you're thinking, wait a minute, I just asked, but you didn't respond. Well, maybe they couldn't have responded because they were in the middle of copying somebody. And when you showed up, that was a problem. So finding a frequency is a challenge. Sometimes you have to tune and tune and tune until you find a spot. And just a matter of patience. Just recognize what's going on real time, that people are there. You might not even hear some of these stations. I've seen situations where someone 200 or 300 miles from me is on the frequency calling CQ. He's getting answers, maybe not at a high rate. So it gave me the impression that, well, maybe this is a frequency that's available. I'm not hearing a lot of activity. But it turns out his signal is much stronger than yours, and you just didn't hear him, and you end up creating problems for him. And, it's a matter of, courtesy for each other and recognizing what's going on. So that's important. And then holding a frequency, that can be equally challenging. I've seen techniques applied where someone a little off frequency is just started calling CQ, fired up, and no one's told them that the frequency is in use. So with your RIT, I would move over, tune the person in properly, hit the XIT button to transmit, or I'd be transceive now on that offset condition, and kindly ask, could you QSY? Could you move the frequencies in use? And then punch the XIT button off and immediately call CQ and then retune my RIT to where I was. That's a clever way to try and keep your frequency clear. But it's a challenge, and things change, and you need to be situationally aware that these things can happen. Don't take it personally, just move on. It's easier. Life's too short to have frequency battles. It just does not make a lot of sense. And clearly, if you're not winning, go on. There's plenty other places you can operate. Some contests, they have a small amount of activity, so the band is wide open. Anywhere you want to go, it's easy to find a spot. Some of the bands that are more popular, say CQ Worldwide or ARRLDX, were packed in, like sardines. And you have to kind of fight to get a spot. It's not easy. And then when conditions get bad, no more 10 meters and the glory of the space and the big signals, or 15 meters starts to get a little rough, everybody compresses on 20 meters. Suddenly you got the entire contest spectrum on one band. I mean, that is particularly brutal. But you just got to learn to deal with it, and sometimes pick a different time, and you can have success. But if you treat all these bands as one band, continuously tuning all 6 bands, you'll never run out of things to do, and it won't be that difficult. So running is a stressful thing, as we've all heard. anywhere from, say, 50 to 200 or more contacts per hour. That's moving along at a pretty good rate. Very stressful. That gets your adrenaline flowing, no question about it. And you can get a little anxious. I've talked to people that I've done some running, but within a few minutes I get very anxious and I'm just not comfortable and I have to quit. That's okay. But if you can translate all that stress and anxiety into some fun, that's the ultimate goal. And you just have to be patient with yourself and be patient with the world as they're calling. So it's a rush. There's no question about it. An expression I ran across some time ago was, with a great signal strength comes great responsibility. And if you're running a pileup and you've got a huge spectrum of signal strength calling you, everything from 30/9 to S2, ideally you want to work them all. So that's the responsibility. You have a pretty good responsibility there to maintain your pileup, do a good job there, but ideally work every single station that calls you, and that can be very, very challenging. But this is the challenge you picked when you pick running, and you've got a good signal. So something to be aware of. Some other thoughts relative to running is just simply call CQ and just give your call sign one time, or maybe twice. That's usually enough. Now, when it comes to CW and reverse beacon networks and skimmers that are in play at a lot of these telnet sites, again, we're addressing those people who are assisted, not the unassisted, because they don't get that luxury. All of the signals are captured. Everyone, you call CQ twice on any given band, and if you have any kind of signal strength anywhere, you're going to get picked up by these skimmers, and then that data will be presented on the band map, so people will know you're there. That's never an issue. On sideband, it's different. There is no skimmer for sideband, so manually these calls need to be entered, and that gets you to tuning the bands, as I mentioned a little while ago about using the telnet or the band map to control up and down. On sideband, you end up with gaps, people that have not been spotted that are there. And I really get a kick out of tuning the band, taking the big knob and turning it and finding new stations that are not spotted. You can tell they're not spotted as you tune onto them, and there's no call sign indication above the entry window. So that's an opportunity for you not only to probably have less of a pileup to deal with to work that station, but you can be a bit of a hero and post that station on the air or on the frequency. And, if you want to take the time, not that I encourage it, but if you take the time and sit back and listen to the fine work that you've just delivered, by posting that information, watch the pileup ensue. And that's always kind of fun. And then move on to the next one. But you got to do both on sideband. You've got to be everywhere in that regard. So back to some other thoughts here. In answering a caller, you want to, even if you get a partial call or a complete call, just send the exchange. That's it. You don't need to repeat anything. Generally, one time is enough, only if they ask for a repeat. But in your CQing, you want to maintain a high duty cycle. Call CQ, listen for maybe a second and a half, 2 seconds maybe. If no one's answering, call CQ again. And what that enables is, if you're listening very often like that, you've got a 2-second listening period, that should naturally keep the pileup down to a minimum, because you're answering people right away. You're not getting to a point of a large out of control pileup because you called CQ for 2 minutes straight, and you've got this huge amount of people calling or waiting to call you. When they call, it's just total bedlam. But if you can keep a high duty cycle and short and good listening periods, but short, you can control that environment very well. It's a good way to go. And again, contesting, it's a time management. So you want to constantly think about, how can I be more efficient? How can I just say what I need to say and move on, and encourage the calling station to do the same. There's a term called stacking calls. That's something I've tried to work on over the years myself. Is when you call CQ, you get a pileup. You have, let's say 3 or 4 people calling you, and one person really stands out, so you go and enter that call. But somehow in the back of your mind, if there's some way to hang on to another call sign, even if it's a partial call sign, that will aid you, because as soon as you're finished with that first contact, you can immediately call that other person. And in high likelihood, they're going to be waiting for you. There are times when they've decided to move on. That's okay. If you've got a great stacking memory, maybe you can call the next person that you had in your head in that last pileup. But that's where the term stacking comes from, is you've got a collection of calls that you've heard and you want to start answering them. And of course, on sideband, good articulation, speak clearly, use the right phonetics, things like that.
So, Mark, we talked earlier about bad habits, and as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking this is where good habits really come into play, right? If you've got a pile up, and we've both been in these, right? You're waiting to be heard, and the person running the pile up's just doing an awful job, and it's just hard to stay in it. So I can imagine again that keeping that moving smoothly and not saying please copy and not being redundant really helps me as somebody who's waiting to get into the log.
It does. All that practice and pursuing pileups, learning what works and what doesn't work in timing of a call. All these different things come to play.
So, Mark, how long should somebody stay on a frequency? Let's say I'm running a frequency and I'm having great success for the first 35, 40 minutes, and it starts to slow down. At what point do the best contesters say, okay, I need to start doing S&P or find another frequency?
Well, for the last hour or two that you've been probably running on that frequency and it suddenly dries up, you've been looking at a screen, an entry window screen, probably not paying attention to the band map window or the multiplier window. A lot of these windows will actually provide some data in terms of what's happening on other bands. That can, you want to leverage those tools all the time, but in particular when things slow down and you're looking for where's my next move, that's a great place to go, is to look at the activity level on the different bands. And you want to pick the highest activity level because that gives you the greatest target opportunity to make contacts. So things like that you want to keep an eye on. Utilize your tools. But things like show DX, SH/DX is a button you can push on the Telnet window that will redisplay the last 100 or so DX spots that have come through. That can give you some guidance in terms of strategy. But it all comes down to, again, my favorite term, situation awareness. You want to be able to analyze what's happening here. I called CQ, I didn't get an answer. I called CQ, no answer. Called CQ, no answer. Do I do a fourth one, or should I just, make a decision to move on? Sometimes it's easier, just go back to search and pounce. You've got the tools. You can go up and down the band very quickly. Maybe at that moment you're getting a sense as you find new call signs, they're much weaker than you might have thought. So maybe the propagation's changing. Maybe that's what's leading to, the downturn in activity. So it's leveraging those things and being aware that the band can change. Another thing in particular could be someone has just stolen your frequency and you didn't even realize it. But they're pointed in an entirely different direction. Not only do you not hear them, but they're answering people that you don't even hear. So it's like, how's this even possible? Well, it can happen. So you need to keep all your options open, stay flexible, be ready to move at any moment, and recognize that it's a fun event. Don't get wrapped around the axle with things not going, as well or as nicely as you might have had with a running frequency.
Mark, this has been a really helpful episode. I think what I'm getting from this is practice, 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 develop great habits, and your favorite term, situational awareness.
Absolutely. It's been a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kevin, W1DED. This is Q5 Ham Radio. I've been with Mark, K1RX, talking about contesting. 73.